There's no tribe better clad, who live in better tepees, or who are better mounted than the Sioux. They catch an abundance of wild horses, which are grazing on the prairies, oftentimes in groups of several hundreds, and from their horses' backs, at full speed, they deal their deadly arrows or wield their long and fatal lances in the chase of the buffaloes, and also in war with their enemies. These people, living mostly in a country of prairies where they easily procure the buffalo skins, construct their wigwams with them in the form of tents, which are more comfortable than rude huts constructed of timber, are more easily built, and have the advantage of being easily transported over the prairies, by which means the Indians are enabled to follow the migrating herds of buffaloes during the summer and fall seasons, when they're busily engaged in drying meat for their winter consumption and dressing robes for their own clothing, and also for barter to the fur traders. From my view of Sioux Village on the upper Missouri, my readers will get a very correct notion of the manner in which these curious people live. There were in this village about 400 skin tents, all built much in the same manner, some 15 or 20 pine poles forming the frame, covered with one entire piece of 15 or 20 buffalo skins sewed together, and most curiously painted and embroidered of all colors, presenting one of the most curious and beautiful scenes imaginable. Inside of these tents, the fire is placed in the center, the smoke escaping out at the top, and at night the inmates all sleep on buffalo skins spread upon the ground, with their feet to the fire, a most safe and not uncomfortable mode. When you enter one of these wigwams, you have to stoop rather awkwardly, but when you're in, you rise up and find a lofty space of some 20 feet above your head. The family are all seated, and no one rises to salute you, whatever your office or your importance may be. All lower their eyes to your feet, instead of staring you in the face, and you are asked to sit down. A robe or a mat of rushes is spread for you, and as they have no chairs, you are at once embarrassed. It's an awkward thing for a white man to sit down upon the ground until he gets used to it, and when he is down, he doesn't know what to do with his legs. The Indians, accustomed to this from childhood, sit down upon and rise from the ground with the same ease and grace that we sit down in and rise from a chair. Both men and women lower themselves to the ground and rise without a hitch or a jerk, and without touching their hand to the ground. This is very curious, but it's exceedingly graceful and neat. The men generally sit cross-legged, and to sit down they cross their feet, closely locked together, and slowly and regularly lower their bodies to sitting posture on the ground. When they rise, they place their feet in the same position, their arms and head also, and rise to a perfectly straight position, apparently without an effort. The women always sit with both feet and lower legs turned under and to the right or the left, and, like the men, lower and raise themselves without touching the ground. When you're seated, to feel at ease, your legs must be crossed and your heels drawn quite close under you, and then you can take the pipe when it's handed to you and get a fair and deliberate glance at things around you. The furniture in these wigwams is not much, but it's very curious in effect and picturesque when we look at it. The first startling thing you will meet on entering will be a half a dozen saucy dogs barking and bristling and showing their teeth, and oftentimes as many screaming children, frightened at your savage and strange appearance. These hushed, you can take a look at other things, and you see shields and quivers and lances and saddles and medicine bags and pouches and spears and cradles and buffalo masks, which each man keeps for dancing the buffalo dance, and a great variety of other picturesque things hanging around, suspended from the poles of the tent, to which they are fastened by thongs. The whole presenting, with the picturesque group around the fire, one of the most curious scenes imaginable. In front of these wigwams, the women are seen busily at work, dressing robes and drying meat. The skin dressing of the Indians, both of the buffaloes and deerskin, is generally very beautiful and soft. Their mode of doing this is very curious. They stretch the skin on a frame or on the ground, and after it has remained some 3 or 4 days with the brains of the buffalo or elk spread over the fleshy side, they grain it with a sort of adze or chisel made of a piece of buffalo bone. Men are seen coming in from the hunt with their horses loaded with meat and skins to keep the poor women at work. It's proverbial in the civilized world that the poor Indian woman has to do all the hard work. Don't believe this, for it is not exactly so. She labors very hard and constantly, it is true. She does most of the drudgery about the village and wigwam and is seen transporting heavy loads. This all looks to the passerby as the slavish compulsion of her cruel husband, who is often seen lying at ease and smoking his pipe as he's looking on. His labors are not seen, and therefore are less thought of when he mounts his horse with his weapons in his hands and, working every nerve and every muscle, dashes amongst the herds in the chase to provide food for his wife and his little children, and scours the country both night and day at the constant risk of his life to protect them from the assaults of their enemies. We see the Indian women in the full enjoyment of their domestic happiness with their little children and dogs around them, the villagers dressed in their ordinary costumes, and the little cupids taking their first lessons in archery, which is the most important feature in their education. Now this happens to be Scalp Day, from which are suspended the scalps which have been taken, which is the signal for all the warriors to do the same, so that the chief and every person in the village can count them and understand each warrior's standing and claims to promotion, which are estimated by the number of scalps he has taken. How curious it is that these ingenious people, who have invented so many ways of constructing their dwellings, never yet have adopted the mode of building with stone. This is probably not the result of ignorance or want of invention, but from their universal policy of leaving no monuments. All the American tribes are more or less migratory, and when they move, they destroy all their marks by burning their wigwams if they cannot take them with them, and smoothing over the graves of their parents and children. George Catlin, 1832.
I am a Minneconjou, and our camp was third from the south. We got up late the morning of the fight. The women went out to dig turnips, and two of my uncles were hunting. My grandmother, who was very old and feeble, and one of my uncles and I stayed in the teepee. When the sun was overhead, I went down to the river to swim, and when I came back, all I had on was my shirt. My grandmother cooked some meat in the ashes and fed us. While we were eating, my uncle said, "When you have eaten, you must go to the horses right away. Something might happen." An older brother of mine and another man were herding the horses in two bunches on Muskrat Creek, downstream below the Santee camp. Before I finished eating, there was an excitement outside. Then I heard our crier saying that the chargers were coming. When we heard this, my uncle said, "I told you before that something might happen. You better go right away and help bring in the horses." I crossed the greasy grass, which was breast deep, and got on top of the Black Butte to look on the other side of the Hunkpapas. Toward the south, I saw soldiers on horseback and spreading out as they came down a slope to the river. They crossed and came on at a trot. I started down the butte, but I was barefoot, and there was a big bed of cactus there. I had to go slow, picking my way. A dust cloud was rising up yonder, and I could see the Hunkpapas were running. And when I looked over onto the hills south and east, I saw other soldiers coming there on horseback. I did not go to the horses. I went down through the cactus as fast as I could and into the village. There were voices all over, and everybody was shouting something and running around. After a while, my brother came driving our horses, and my uncle said, "Hurry up, we shall go forth." I caught my gray horse and took my six-shooter and hung my bow and arrows over my shoulder. I had killed a red bird a few days before, and I fastened this in my hair. I had made a vow that I would make an offering if this would keep me from getting hurt in the next fight, and it did. We started and went downstream to the Muskrat Creek, beyond the Santee camp. We were going to meet the second band of soldiers. By the time we got there, they must have been fighting on the hill already, because as we rode up east from the mouth of the Muskrat Creek, We met a Lakota with blood running out of his mouth and over his horse's shoulders. His name was Long Elk. There were warriors ahead of us, the fronters, who are the bravest and have had the most practice in war. I was 16 years old and was in the rear with the less brave, and we waited with our horses quite a while. Partway up, we met another Lakota. He was on foot and he was bleeding and dizzy. He would get up and then he would fall down again. When we got farther up the hill, I could see the soldiers. They were off their horses, holding them by the bridles. They were ready for us and were shooting. Our people were all around the hill on every side by this time. I heard some of our men shouting, "They are gone!" And I saw that many of the soldiers' horses had broken loose and were running away. Everywhere our warriors began yelling, "Hoka, hey! Hurry! Hurry!" Then we all went up, and it got dark with dust and smoke. I could see warriors fighting all around me like shadows, and the noise of all those hooves and guns and cries was so loud it seemed quiet in there, and the voices seemed to be on top of the cloud. It was like a bad dream. All at once, I saw a soldier right beside me, and I leaned over and knocked him down with the butt of the six-shooter. I think I had already shot it empty, but I don't remember when. The soldier fell off and was under the hoofs. There were so many of us that I think we did not need guns. Just the hoofs would have been enough. After this, we started down the hillside in formation toward the village, and there were dead men and horses scattered along there too. They were all rubbed out. We were all crazy, and I will tell you something to show how crazy we were. There was a dead Indian lying there on his face, and someone said, "Scalp that Ree." A man got off and scalped him, and when they turned the dead man over, it was a Shiloh, one of our friends. We were all crazy. We could see the women coming over now in a swarm, and they were all making the tremolo. We waited around there a while, and then we saw soldiers coming on a hill toward the south and east. Everybody began yelling, "Hurry!" And we started for the soldiers. They ran back toward where they came from. One got killed, and many of us got off and clubbed him. Then we chased all the soldiers back to the hill where they were before. They had their pack mules and horses on the inside, in front of them to hide themselves from bullets, but we surrounded them, and the hill we were on was higher and we could see them plain. We put our horses down under the hills so that they were safe. We all kept shooting at the soldiers and their horses. It was very hot, and there were some soldiers who started down the hill with kettles to get water from the river. They did not get far, and what was left of them went running back up the hill. I heard that some soldiers did get some water later, but I did not see them. Once a Lakota on the other side raced right up to the soldiers to show how brave he was, but they killed him, and we could not get his body. By now it was nearly sundown. I had not been feeling hungry because there was the smell of blood everywhere. But now, I began to feel hungry anyway. The bravest of the braves got together and talked over what we should do that night. They decided that some of us should go home and eat and bring back something for those who stayed to watch the soldiers. We could not get at the soldiers, so we were going to starve and dry them out. I went back home with the others, and it was sundown then. At first I thought they had broken camp, but they had not. They had only gathered all the camps together in one solid village. I did not go back to the hill with the others that night. We built fires all over the camp, and everybody was excited. I couldn't sleep because when I shut my eyes, I could see all those horrible sights again. I think nobody slept. Next morning early, the crier went around and said, "The remainder of the soldiers shall die today." So after we had eaten, we all got ready. This time I was dressed and had my moccasins and leggings on. The day before I had only a shirt. This time I had my saddle too. I was prepared to fight. We all rode over there, and the party that had watched all night went home. We were scattered all around the soldiers with our horses under the hill. But it was harder to hit the soldiers now, because they had been digging in the night. The day was very hot, And now and then, some soldiers would start crawling down toward the river for a drink. We killed some of these, then the others would run back. Maybe some got water. I do not know. We kept shooting at each other. Once I heard someone cry, "Hey, hey!" I crawled over there, and a Lakota had been shot above the eyebrow, and he was dead. After a long while, we heard that more soldiers were coming. Then everybody started back home, and the people were saying, "We will leave this and let it go." Then we all broke camp and started for the Bighorn Mountains. If those soldiers had not come, we would have rubbed them all out on the hill. Standing bare,